You wake up every single morning carrying something heavy, not a physical weight, something deeper, a pressure that lives behind your eyes before the day even starts. The same thoughts circling, the same worries waiting, the same version of yourself staring back from the mirror, wondering when things are finally going to shift. And here's what's quietly killing you. You've been working at this. You've been trying. You read things, watch things, push yourself, grind through days that leave you emptier than when they started. And somehow, no matter how much you do, the weight doesn't lift. The problems don't disappear. They just change their clothes and come back wearing a different face. What if I told you that's not because you're weak? What if it's because everything you've been taught about how to handle your problems is fundamentally completely wrong? Here's the lie nobody warned you about. You were raised to believe that problems are puzzles. That for every problem there is a corresponding solution, and your job is to find it fast enough. Get the promotion, get the relationship right, get the money sorted, fix this one broken thing. And then, finally, you'll have peace. So you've spent years running towards solution, better strategies, better systems, better advice. And somehow the finish line keeps moving. Somehow there's always another problem waiting just past the one you just solved. That's not bad luck. That's not the universe working against you. That's what happens when you treat the symptom while the root goes completely untouched. I want you to think about something that happened recently. Maybe last week. Maybe last night. Someone you know. Maybe it was you, completely unraveling over a situation that couldn't be controlled. Not crying over something they did wrong. Crying because reality wasn't cooperating, because life handed them something they didn't ask for, and the only question they could form was, why is this happening to me? And I'll tell you what I realized watching that. That question isn't a cry for help. That question is the problem itself, because buried inside it is an assumption so dangerous most people never even notice it's there. The assumption that you were supposed to be exempt, that life was supposed to be fair. That suffering means something has gone wrong with you specifically, that you've been singled out, that you're failing at something everyone else is quietly passing. But what if pain isn't punishment? What if the chaos showing up in your life right now isn't evidence that you're broken? It's evidence that you're alive. What if the men who built empires from ruin, who walked through fire and came out forged rather than destroyed, didn't have easier lives than you? They just had a completely different relationship with hardship. There is a body of wisdom so old and so ruthlessly practical that modern self-help can't touch it. Not the kind that tells you to visualize a better life while sitting still. Not the kind that smiles at you from a book cover and promises transformation in 10 days. I'm talking about philosophy written by men under real pressure. A man who was enslaved and had everything stripped from him and still found something no master could take. A man who ruled the most powerful empire on earth and spent his private hours wrestling with his own failures honestly, without excuses. Men who stared into genuine darkness and refused to look away until they understood what it was actually made of. These men didn't stumble onto peace. They built it deliberately from the inside out, and what they discovered is something that cuts against almost everything you've been told. Your circumstances are not the source of your suffering. You are. Not because you're broken, but because you've been handed the wrong tools and taught the wrong questions. Between what happens to you and how you experience what happens to you, there is a space. It's small. Most people never find it. But inside that space lives every piece of power you've ever had. The Stoics built an entire philosophy inside that space. And today I'm going to hand you 10 principles pulled directly from that tradition. Not as abstract ideas, not as concepts to consider when you're feeling philosophical, but as tools you can use today in the exact life you're already living. These aren't comfortable lessons. I want to be clear about that. Real wisdom never is. What I'm about to share with you will push against beliefs you've carried for years. It will ask you to take responsibility for things you'd rather blame on the world. It will require you to look at yourself without the armor of excuses. And that is genuinely one of the hardest things a man can do. But if you're exhausted, not just tired, but exhausted at a level that sleep doesn't fix, if you're watching the same patterns play out in your relationships, your work, your inner world, like a film you've seen too many times, if some part of you already knows that the change has to come from somewhere deeper than a new habit or a new strategy, then stay with me. Every word in this script was written for exactly where you are right now. Because your problems aren't going to vanish after today, but you are going to become someone who relates to those problems completely differently. And when that shift happens, when you change, everything that once felt immovable starts to move. Before we go further, if this already feels like something you needed to hear, drop a comment right now. Type "I'm ready," because that's the first honest thing you can do. The first act of choosing truth over comfortable noise. Let's begin. There's a man I want you to imagine. He wakes up every morning with a list. Not a to-do list, something closer to a battle plan. Before the noise of the day reaches him, before anyone else has a claim on his attention, he sits with his own mind and he asks one question: what actually matters today? Not what's urgent, not what's loud, what actually matters. Then he works from that question like a compass. Everything that doesn't point toward that answer gets cut. Quietly, firmly, without apology. That man isn't a monk. He was the most powerful man in the world. He commanded armies, governed millions, navigated political betrayal, personal loss, and constant pressure that would crack most people completely open. His name was Marcus Aurelius. And the reason we're still talking about him 2,000 years later isn't because of his power. It's because of what he did with his mind while he had it. He wrote this, and I want you to hear it slowly. Concentrate every minute like a Roman on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. Not most minutes, not the minutes when you feel motivated. Every single minute. Full presence, full intention, full commitment to what's actually in front of you right now. Now look at your own life honestly. How many of your minutes actually belong to you? You're eating, but you're watching something. You're with someone you love, but you're half somewhere else. You're doing work that matters, but 15 different tabs are quietly fracturing your concentration into pieces so small, none of them can build anything real. You think you're managing multiple things. What you're actually doing is failing at all of them slowly, in a way that's comfortable enough that you don't notice until you look back and wonder where the years went. Here's the principle that changes this. Lesson 1. Your attention is your life. Protect it like one. The Stoics understood something that neuroscience is only now catching up to, that where your attention goes, your life follows, not metaphorically. The quality of your attention determines the quality of every single thing you build, every relationship you maintain, every skill you develop. Scattered attention produces a scattered life. Focused attention directed with intention is how ordinary men build extraordinary things. You've been told your problem is a lack of time. That's not true. You have time for everything you genuinely prioritize. If someone offered you a life-changing amount of money to spend one focused hour every day on the thing that matters most to you, you would find that hour. You'd cut something. You'd wake up earlier. You'd stop doing something that currently feels necessary, because suddenly the cost of distraction would be visible. The problem isn't the hours. The problem is that the cost of distraction is invisible until it's too late to pay it back. Every notification you respond to is an interruption you chose to allow. Every hour spent scrolling is an hour that belonged to something real and was traded for something hollow. And the brutal truth is this: you will not get those hours back. Not one of them. The Stoics practiced memento mori, a daily reminder of death, not to live in fear, but to live awake. You have a specific limited number of hours remaining in your life. You don't know the number, and right now you're spending those hours as though they're infinite. Focus isn't about doing more. Focus is about doing less with your entire self behind it. One thing done fully changes more than 10 things done halfway. Now let's go deeper, because fixing your attention only works if you understand what you're actually directing it toward. And this is where most men make the second critical mistake. Lesson 2. Stop trying to control what was never yours to control. Epictetus, the man who was literally owned by another human being, built an entire philosophy around one distinction. He divided all of reality into two categories: things within your control and things outside your control. And he was ruthless about which was which. Within your control, your thoughts, your choices, your effort, your response, your values, your character. That's the complete list. Everything else, other people's opinions, the economy, your past, the weather, how someone treats you, whether things go the way you planned, none of it is yours to control. None of it. And the moment you accept that fully, something extraordinary happens. You stop bleeding energy into a fight you are never going to win. Think about how much of your mental energy right now is spent on things outside that first category. You're rehearsing conversations with people who aren't in the room. You're worrying about outcomes you cannot determine. You're carrying resentment toward people whose behavior you have exactly zero power over. You're anxious about futures that may never arrive. And all of that energy, every ounce of it, is being pulled from the only place where you actually have power, the present moment. Your own response, your own choices. Here's a scenario I want you to sit with. Two men apply for the same position. Both are turned down. The first man spends 3 weeks furious at the decision, obsessing over whether it was fair, replaying the interview, resenting the people who chose someone else. The second man spends 1 day feeling the disappointment fully, not suppressing it, feeling it, and then asks one question: what's within my control right now? He improves what he can improve. He applies somewhere else. He uses the rejection as data rather than as a verdict on his worth. Same event, completely different expenditure of energy, completely different outcome. Not because the second man didn't care, but because he understood where his power actually lived. This is not passivity. The Stoics were not passive men. Marcus Aurelius led armies. Epictetus built a school of philosophy that outlasted emperors. Seneca advised the most powerful political figures of his era. They were deeply engaged with life. They simply refused to waste engagement on what they couldn't move. The question to start asking every single day about every situation draining your energy is this: is this within my control or outside it? If it's within your control, act on it immediately and completely. If it's outside your control, release it. Not because it doesn't matter, but because holding on to it is costing you the energy you need for everything that does, your attention and your control. These are the two foundational tools. Get these right, and everything else we're about to talk about becomes possible. Get these wrong, and no amount of strategy, discipline, or effort will ever be enough. The oath for this section is simple: say it and mean it. I spend my energy only where I have real power. There's a kind of suffering that nobody talks about honestly. It's not the suffering that comes from losing something real. It's the suffering that comes from protecting something that was never real to begin with. It's quieter than grief, more persistent than failure. And it follows men through their entire lives like a shadow they can't name. It's the suffering of ego. Not ego in the casual sense, not arrogance or vanity, though those are part of it. I mean the deeper thing, the constructed identity. The version of yourself you've been defending so long, you've forgotten you built it. The image you carry into every room, every conversation, every decision. The one that whispers, don't let them see you struggle, don't let them see you fail, don't let them see that you don't have it together. That voice, that constant, exhausting performance, here's what the Stoics understood that modern culture refuses to teach. Your ego is not your strength, it is your most expensive vulnerability. Every time you make a decision to protect your image rather than pursue what's true, you pay a price. Every time you refuse to admit you're wrong because being wrong feels like losing, you pay a price. Every time you choose the appearance of confidence over the reality of growth, you pay a price. And those prices compound quietly until one day the bill arrives and you don't recognize the life you're standing in. Lesson 3. Your ego is the cage. Humility is... Marcus Aurelius, a man who had every reason to believe his own myth, wrote privately about his own failures with an honesty that would embarrass most people. He didn't write, I am great. He wrote, I keep failing at this. I need to do better. He held power with one hand and self-examination with the other. And that combination, that willingness to see himself clearly without the armor of self-protection, is precisely what made him the kind of man history remembers. Real humility isn't weakness. Real humility is the most accurate possible assessment of who you actually are. Not worse than you are, not better than you are, but exactly what you are right now, with full acknowledgement of what still needs to change. That kind of clarity is It's also the only foundation strong enough to build something lasting on. Think about the last time someone criticized you. Not attacked you, criticized you. Said something true about a flaw, a mistake, a pattern you carry. What happened inside you? Most men go one of two directions. They either collapse, taking the criticism as total condemnation, turning it into proof they're fundamentally broken. Or they deflect, immediately finding reasons the criticism is wrong, unfair, coming from the wrong person. Both respond the ego that cannot hold an honest mirror without flinching. What would it look like to receive criticism the way a craftsman receives feedback on his work? Not personally, not defensively, simply as information. Is this true? If it is, what do I do with it? That's it. No performance, no ego protection, just honest engagement with reality. That capacity alone, just that one shift, would change more about your life than most strategies ever could. Lesson 4, you don't see the world as it is. You see it as you are. This one cuts deep, so stay with me. Every single thing you experience passes through a filter before it reaches your consciousness. That filter is built from your history, your wounds, your assumptions, your beliefs about what you deserve, and what the you. And here's what's dangerous. You don't experience the filter. You experience what comes out the other side, and you call it reality. You call it the truth. You call it just how things are. But two men can walk into the same room, face the same situation, hear the same words, and come out with completely different experiences. Not because one of them is smarter, because their filters are different. Their stories are different, and those stories shape everything. Epictetus said it plainly. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions about things. Read that again. Not the things themselves, the opinions about the things. The meaning you assign, the story you construct, the interpretation you layer over raw experience before you've even decided to think consciously about it. Here's where this becomes practical. You are carrying stories right now that you mistake for facts. Stories about who you are, stories about what's possible for you, stories about how other people see you, what you're capable of, what you deserve, what's already been decided about your life. And those stories are not neutral, they are active. They are shaping every choice you make, every risk you take or avoid, every relationship you allow yourself to fully enter. A man who carries the story "I always fail when it really matters" doesn't need an external obstacle. He creates his own. He hesitates at the wrong moment. He self-sabotages before the world gets a chance to. He collects evidence for a verdict that was never actually handed down. He handed it to himself. So here's the question that changes everything. Where did this story come from? Not is it true, because right now it feels absolutely true, and arguing with that feeling directly doesn't work. But where did it come from? Whose voice is it actually in? A parent? A teacher? A moment from 15 years ago that hurt so much you decided it meant something permanent about you? The Stoics practice something called prosoche, a sustained, unflinching attention to their own inner life. Not navel-gazing, not endless introspection for its own sake. Deliberate examination of the thoughts and assumptions driving their behavior so that nothing operated on autopilot, so that no old wound got to make new decisions without being seen first. That practice starts with one question asked honestly every single day. What am I assuming right now that I haven't examined? About this situation, about this person, about myself, about what's possible. Because somewhere in those unexamined assumptions is the story that's been quietly running your life while you thought you were making free choices. Lesson 5. The obstacle is not in your way. The obstacle is the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote something so counterintuitive it sounds wrong the first time you hear it. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Most men treat obstacles as interruption, as evidence that something has gone wrong, that the path is blocked, that maybe they chose wrong, or started too late, or aren't meant for this. The obstacle becomes a reason to stop, a justification, a story about why the outcome was never really available. But the Stoics saw obstacles completely differently. They saw them as the actual material of growth, not detours from the path itself. Because here's what's true without except: the version of you that exists on the other side of a real obstacle is more capable than the version that existed before it. Not in theory, literally, neurologically, psychologically. The man who has been through something genuinely hard and kept going has capacities that the man who was never tested simply does not have. There is no shortcut to that kind of strength. The obstacle is how it gets built. Think about every significant capacity you currently have. Every skill, every piece of resilience, every moment of genuine confidence. Where did it come from? Not from the easy days. It came from the days that didn't cooperate. From the failures that forced a better approach. From the moments that asked more than you thought you had, and you found it anyway. The obstacle you're facing right now, the one that feels like it's blocking everything, is not a sign that you're in the wrong place. It might be the most important teacher you've ever had. The question is whether you're willing to sit with it long enough to learn what it actually came to teach, or whether you'll spend your energy resenting its presence and missing the lesson entirely. Your declaration for this section: speak it with intention. I see myself clearly, and I turn every obstacle into the path forward. There is a specific kind of pain that comes not from losing something, but from refusing to accept that it's already gone. You've felt it. Most men carry it without ever naming it accurately. They call it frustration, they call it anger, they call it being stuck. But underneath all of those labels is one simple, brutal truth. They are in a war with impermanence, and impermanence has never lost that war. Not once, not in the entire history of human experience. Everything changes, everything passes. Everything you are holding on to with both hands right now. The version of your life that felt right, the relationship that defined you, the identity you built around a role or a status or a chapter that has already closed. All of it moves. All of it transforms. All of it eventually becomes something else, whether you consent to it or not. The only question is whether you move with it consciously or get dragged by it unconsciously. Lesson 6. Nothing is permanent. That's not the tragedy. Fighting it is. Marcus Aurelius returned to this truth constantly in his private journals. Not because he was morbid, because he was honest. He watched emperors fall, friends die, empires strain at their edges. He wrote about the great men of previous generations, powerful, celebrated, remembered, and noted that even their memory was fading. Not to despair over it, to be freed by it, because when you truly absorb the impermanence of everything, something remarkable happens. You stop white-knuckling life. You stop spending your energy trying to freeze moments that were always meant to flow. Here's where this becomes viscerally practical. Think about what you're resisting right now. A relationship that changed, a version of yourself that no longer fits, a circumstance that shifted in a direction you didn't choose, a door that closed before you were ready. And notice, really notice, how much energy you are pouring into the resistance itself. Not into grieving it, not into adapting to it, not into building something new from it. Just pure resistance, just the exhausting, endless work of arguing with what has already happened. The Stoics had a practice called amor fati, love of fate, not passive acceptance, not defeated resignation, something far more powerful. The active embrace of what is, including the painful parts, as the necessary raw material of what you're becoming. The fire doesn't apologize for burning, the winter doesn't apologize for arriving, and reality doesn't require your approval to proceed. What you can choose, the only thing you can choose, is the quality of presence you bring to what's already here. A man who masters impermanence doesn't become cold, he becomes free. He loves fully, knowing it will change. He builds seriously, knowing it will end. He commits completely, knowing nothing is guaranteed. And paradoxically, that willingness to hold things lightly makes him more present with them than the man who grips everything so tightly he can't actually feel what he's holding. Lesson 7. The people around you are a mirror. Choose what you reflect. Epictetus was direct about this in a way that polite society tends to avoid. He said that you will inevitably become like the people you spend the most time with, not similar to them, like them, at the level of values, habits, standards, and expectations. The influence is not occasional, it is constant, subtle, and operating whether you notice it or not. Look at the 5 people who have the most access to your time and energy right now, not the people you wish you spent time with. The actual people, the ones in your daily orbit. Now ask yourself honestly, are these people pulling you toward the man you're trying to become, or are they providing comfortable company for the man you're trying to leave behind? This isn't about judgment. It isn't about discarding people carelessly. Some relationships carry obligation, history, genuine love that doesn't disappear because someone isn't growing at your pace. But it is about honesty. About acknowledging the invisible tax that certain environments place on your growth, about recognizing that every hour spent in an environment of low standards, chronic complaining, or comfortable stagnation is an hour your own standards quietly soften without you noticing. The Stoics believed deeply in community, but community of a specific kind, People who challenged each other toward virtue. People who held each other to their stated values rather than excusing each other from them. People who told each other the truth rather than the comfortable thing. That kind of relationship is rare. It is also the most valuable thing you can cultivate. One honest friend who tells you what you need to hear is worth more than 20 comfortable friendships built entirely on mutual validation. Find the people who make you better by their presence alone. Protect those relationships with everything you have. And gently, honestly, begin to limit the influence of the environments that are quietly keeping you small. Lesson 8. Discipline is not punishment. It is the highest form of self-respect. Here's what nobody tells young men about discipline. It doesn't feel like restriction when you understand it correctly. Real discipline, the Stoic kind, feels like freedom. Because what it actually is, at its core, is the daily practice of choosing your future self over your present comfort. And a man who can do that consistently becomes someone whose life is actually his own. Most men live reactively. They do what feels natural in the moment. They eat what's easy, rest when they're not tired, avoid what's uncomfortable, chase what's immediately pleasurable. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things in moderation. The problem is that a life built entirely on what feels natural in the moment is a life built by your lowest impulses rather than your highest values. And you will feel that gap. You feel it right now. That quiet dissatisfaction that isn't quite sadness and isn't quite anger, that's the gap between who you are and who you know you're capable of being. Discipline closes that gap, not dramatically, not in one grand gesture, one decision at a time. The decision to do the thing you committed to even when the feeling has left. The decision to hold the standard even when nobody is watching. The decision to be in private, the man you claim to be in public. Marcus Aurelius woke before dawn in a cold palace with the most demanding job in the known world, and still sat with his thoughts, still examined his behavior, still held himself to his own standard, not because someone was watching, because he understood that every act of self-discipline was a vote for the man he was choosing to become. Every act of self-indulgence at the expense of what mattered was a vote against him. You are voting right now. Every day with every choice, you are casting a vote. The accumulation of those votes over weeks and months and years becomes your character, and your character becomes your life. There is no separation between the small private decisions you make when no one is looking and the large outcomes that define your existence. They are the same thing, just separated by time. Lesson 9. Suffering is inevitable. Misery is always optional. Pain will arrive in your life without asking permission. It always has. It always. Loss, failure, rejection, disappointment. These are not aberrations in a life that was supposed to go smoothly. They are the texture of a life actually lived. The Stoics didn't seek suffering, but they didn't run from it either. They walked toward it with open eyes because they understood something critical. The meaning you assign to pain determines what it does to you. Epictetus, who had been enslaved, beaten, and stripped of every external freedom a person can have, still taught from a position of complete inner sovereignty, not because his pain wasn't real. It was absolutely real. But because he had drawn a line, a clear, immovable line, between what could be done to him externally and what he would allow to happen to him internally. They could own his body. They could not own his response. That line is available to you right now. Whatever you're carrying, and I don't minimize it, some of what men carry is genuinely crushing. There is a distinction between the pain itself and the story you construct around the pain. The pain says this hurts. The story says this hurt means I'm broken, cursed, unworthy, and it will never get better. One of those is true. One of those is a choice. And you are making that choice right now, consciously or not. Resistance multiplies pain. When you fight against what has already happened, when you spend your energy in the exhausting argument with reality, you take the original suffering and you add misery on top of it. The pain was always going to be there. The misery is entirely constructed. And it costs you something you cannot afford. The energy needed to actually move through what you're facing and come out the other side of it. Feel the pain. Let it be exactly as heavy as it actually is. Don't minimize it. Don't perform strength you don't feel. Don't rush past grief that deserves its time. But draw that line. Feel the pain without adding the story that turns temporary suffering into permanent identity. Because the person you become on the other side of genuine pain, if you move through it rather than around it, is someone with a depth of character that cannot be faked and cannot be given. It can only be earned. Your declaration for everything in this section. Say it and mean every word. I move with life instead of fighting it, and I transform pain into power. I want you to stop for a moment. Not metaphorically, actually stop. Put everything else down inside your mind and sit with what I'm about to say, because this is the lesson that every other lesson has been building toward. This is the one the Stoics returned to more than any other. The one Marcus Aurelius wrote about in the quiet hours before dawn, when the palace was silent, and he was just a man alone with the truth of his own existence. You are going to die. Not someday in some comfortable abstract future that feels safely distant. Actually die. Your heart will beat for the last time. Your last conversation will happen without you knowing it's the last one. Your last morning will arrive and you won't be able to distinguish it from any other. And between now and that moment, you have a specific, non-negotiable, completely non-refundable amount of time. You don't know how much. Nobody does. And you are spending it right now, today, as though the supply is infinite. Lesson 10. Your death is certain. Your life is not yet complete. Act accordingly. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that has stayed with serious men for 2,000 years. He wrote that you could leave life right now, and that fact should determine everything. What you do, what you say, how you treat the people in front of you, what you allow to matter, and what you quietly release. This wasn't the writing of a depressed man. This was the writing of a man more awake than almost anyone around him. A man who had refused the comfortable lie that there would always be more time. Because here's what that lie costs you. It costs you the conversation you keep meaning to have, the relationship you keep meaning to repair, the work you keep meaning to start when conditions are better, when you feel more ready, when the timing finally cooperates. It costs you the version of yourself you keep promising is coming, The one who lives fully, loves without holding back, takes the risks that actually matter, stops performing safety, and starts choosing meaning. That version isn't coming later. Later is the most expensive word in the human language. Later is where unlived lives go to wait forever. Think about someone you've lost, someone who was here and then wasn't. Would they give anything for one more ordinary Tuesday? One more unremarkable conversation? One more chance to say the thing they kept almost saying? You have that Tuesday right now. You have that conversation available to you. You have that chance sitting in front of you today, dressed so ordinarily you nearly walked past it. And you are spending it on worry about things that won't matter, on resentment toward people who won't remember, on the performance of a life instead of the actual living of one. The Stoics practiced death meditation, memento mori, not as an exercise in darkness, but as the most powerful antidote to sleepwalking that has ever been developed. When you sit each morning with the honest acknowledgement that this day is not guaranteed, something shifts in how you move through it. The petty things fall away naturally. The grudges that were eating your energy lose their grip. The fear of judgment from people whose opinions were never actually yours to carry dissolves. What remains, what becomes clear with a sharpness that nothing else produces, is what actually matters to you, who actually matters to you, what you would regret leaving undone. That clarity is available to you right now. You don't need a diagnosis, a loss, a near-death experience to wake up inside your own life. You need only to take mortality seriously for long enough to let it reorganize your priorities honestly. Seneca wrote with an urgency that cuts through centuries without losing a single edge. He said to begin at once to live and to count each separate day as a separate life. Not tomorrow, not after the next milestone. Now. This day, this hour. This version of your life exactly as it is, with all its incompleteness and imperfection and beautiful, irreplaceable specificity. What would you do differently if you knew you had 1 year left? 6 months? 30 days? Why? Honestly, why are you not doing those things now? The answer, if you're willing to look at it directly, is that you're trading the life you actually want for the comfort of believing there's still time to want it later. That trade feels safe. It is the most dangerous transaction a man can make. This is not a call to recklessness. The Stoics were not reckless men. This is a call to authenticity, to stop saving your real self for a future that isn't promised, to stop rehearsing your life and start living it, to say what needs to be said today, to begin what needs to be started today. To be in this specific unrepeatable moment, the man you've been planning to become, because the biggest risk, the one that dwarfs every other risk you're afraid of, is arriving at the end of your life with a list of things you almost did. Things you meant to, things you were going to do when the time was right. The time was always right, the time was always now, and now is still available to you for a limited time only, with no extensions and no refunds. Now I want to speak to you directly, not as a narrator, as someone who has sat with everything we've covered today and felt the weight of it. You came to this video carrying something. Maybe you know exactly what it is. Maybe it's been nameless for so long you've stopped trying to name it. But you came here because something in you recognized that the way you've been approaching your life, the strategies, the patterns, the stories, the defenses, isn't working the way you need it to work. And that recognition, that quiet, honest admission, is not weakness. It is the beginning of everything. The 10 lessons we covered today are not a checklist. They are not 10 separate things to fix. They are one unified truth approached from 10 different angles. And that truth is this: you have more power over your experience of life than you have ever been taught to believe. Not power over everything, not power over other people or circumstances or the fundamental conditions of existence, but power over the one place where all of your actual life happens, inside you, in the space between what occurs and how you respond, in the story you choose to tell, in the attention you choose to protect, in the discipline you choose to practice, in the mortality you choose to face honestly rather than avoid conveniently. The Stoics were not superhuman. Marcus Aurelius failed at his own standards regularly and said so in his own words. Epictetus carried wounds that never fully healed. Seneca contradicted his own philosophy in ways that troubled him deeply. They were men, complicated, struggling, genuinely trying. What made them extraordinary wasn't the absence of struggle. It was the refusal to stop examining themselves honestly in the middle of it. The commitment to keep returning to their values even when they fell short. The daily, unglamorous, deeply serious practice of trying to be better than they were yesterday. That practice is available to you. Starting today, starting with one lesson, not all 10, just one. The one that landed somewhere real inside you, the one you felt rather than just understood. Take that one and do something with it today. Not perfectly, not permanently, just today. One honest application of one genuine truth. Because transformation doesn't arrive in a single dramatic moment. It arrives in the accumulation of small, honest, daily choices made by a man who has decided, genuinely decided, not just hoped, that the life he's capable of living is worth the discomfort of actually pursuing it. You are not your patterns, you are not your history. You are not the stories that were handed to you before you were old enough to examine them. You are what you choose to do next, and next is right now. The ancient Stoics are gone. Their names persist in history books and philosophy courses and the margins of journals kept by men quietly trying to become something worth becoming. But their wisdom isn't historical, it's alive. It works today in your life in the exact circumstances you're navigating, with the exact struggles you're carrying. It works because it was never about a specific time or culture. It was always about the permanent, unchanging territory of the human mind and what a man can build inside it when he decides to take it seriously. So here is what I'm asking you to do right now, not someday. Right now, hit the like button, not as a courtesy, but as a commitment. A signal to yourself that you chose truth today over comfortable noise. Subscribe to this channel, because what we're building here is a community of men who are serious. Not about appearing strong, but about actually becoming it. Share this video with one man in your life who needs it. Not because you think he's broken, because you think he's ready. There's a difference, and you know who that person is. And in the comments below, I want you to type one phrase. 4 words that serve as your declaration, your commitment, your first act of the man you're choosing to become today. Type this: I am built different. Not because it sounds good, because you're deciding right now that it's true. Because every lesson you absorbed today, every uncomfortable truth you sat with instead of scrolling past, every moment you chose to stay when it would have been easier to leave, that is what being built different actually looks like. Not the aesthetic, the practice. Your death is coming. Your life is happening right now. The man you're capable of becoming is not waiting for better circumstances. He is waiting for you to stop waiting. Go be him. Starting today. Starting now. Starting with the very next choice you make when this video ends. The Stoics would ask you one final question before you go. They asked it of themselves every evening without exception. Who did you choose to be today? Make sure tomorrow you have an answer worth giving.